In today's tutorial, we are going to paint this beautiful peacock butterfly. I can't wait to show you how we get here. This contour, the outline, is available in my store, so you can find the link for that down below, along with several other butterfly outline that we've done in tutorials, but that will be linked down below. And I am going to start by actually lightening everything. So I wanted you to kind of see what I was working with, and then we're going to lighten it with this kneaded eraser. I just did this in a regular pencil. It's actually the pencil my kid does his homework with. So not the best drawing pencil, probably 2B. So very soft. So I definitely want to pick some of this up with just a kneaded eraser, and I'm just rolling it along. You can see how it's picking up that excess lead. And to kind of reset it, I'm just going to pull it, and then I'm going to roll along this second side. This will also help to get rid of kind of any excess oils that might be on the page from my hand. It's not a bad idea to do overall. So I can still see it. I realize from the camera, it's very difficult to see, but it's pretty easy for me to see, and to see kind of like some of the details that I've mapped out that you'll find in the template if you choose to use it. All right, let's talk about palette. So I just kind of played around a little bit, and I wanted to share with you the colors that I'm going to be using. Now, if you have taken if you've followed any of my butterfly tutorials in the past, some of these will be review. We will be using white as well as Hematite Genuine, which is kind of my favorite go-to black. It's a little bit warmer. It's a Daniel Smith color, very pigmented. It does granulate, but I actually like that for my butterflies. This is kind of a mix. I'm playing around with how I'm going to eventually mix the brown that is so prevalent in the peacock butterfly. I also have transparent yellow, very similar to lemon yellow, as well as I'm going to be using Scarlet Lake for the ruddy red-orange color. And a good alternative would be cadmium red. For the blue bits, I believe I'm going to be using cerulean, though a good alternative would be Winsor blue. In addition to the pigments that I have listed, I will also be testing out this fine line masking fluid pen. I've used masking fluid many times in the past, but I was going to use this for a different tutorial, but my masking fluid that I've been using for years, which is this with Winsor & Newton, it's great. It's just what I have, but it is done. So you can see there is no more fluid left to my masking fluid. So we are going to switch directions a little bit and test out this beauty. Let's get started. All right, before I add in the masking fluid, I'm taking just a little bit of our transparent yellow, and I'm really going to water this down. So see how pigmented it is here? I really want it watered down. I'm going to add a very light, very subtle underpainting. So just so you can see, this is where the body is and the wings come out. And I'm going to add it before we add in our masking fluid, just to make sure that that yellow tone is underneath for just kind of the speckles that we have coming throughout it. That will mean that when I take off the masking fluid, the yellow has been preserved. At least that's the goal, right? Again, this is going to be very light. I can always go back in and add more pigment later, but it's very hard to pick it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to very gently add some of this pigment in here. And I'm going to keep, it looks like it's most concentrated here, and I'm going to let it kind of, now I'm cleaning my brush off, it's just a little damp, and I'm going to kind of pull it down a little bit, and that will help it to kind of fade gracefully. That way it's not necessarily changing. Like this section here above, we've got like kind of the eye, and then this dark section, it's kind of a creamy tone, not necessarily yellow. So I'm keeping the bulk of the yellow close to the body of the butterfly, and I'm allowing the rest of it to kind of fade out. Even here where it eventually leads into kind of our orangey tone, I'm even going to bring it in here. Just pulling it over. We're kind of painting what's underneath right now. We're not really painting what you can see as readily, because there are these beautiful stripes over here, and then this section with the white dots here. So we want to keep those clean and clear, but still have our beautiful fade out. And then here, kind of at the top of the wing, I'm going to add a little bit of our Scarlet Lake or cadmium red, depending on what you have in your stash or what is readily available to you, because I see just at the tip base here, it kind of fades in. So I'm cleaning off my brush. That's more than enough pigment. And I'm going to, with just a damp brush, kind of tap that where I want it to go. It was just the slightest hint, so I still want to capture it. I just want to be very delicate with how I do it. All right, so my left side is still drying a little bit, but I'm going to work on my right side and just get this started. Again, I'm using this fine line masking fluid that I'll have linked down below, and you can see exactly what I'm using, but I am twisting off the cap, and we've got this cute little squeezy tube. I've never used this before. So before I go too crazy, I'm going to just take a little bit of bath tissue and kind of test it out on here so I can see what this looks like without it. Ooh. Ooh. Glad I used it on the bath tissue first. Okay, hopefully user error. Nope, it's still coming out that one side. What is going on? So I took the pen apart and it looks like, so there's this pin that goes inside. It looks like there might be some, I don't know, it seems pretty soft. All right, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but apparently whatever was clogging it is now stuck to my body because I noticed it's working fine. So we're gonna try it. It might be a bad idea, but we're gonna try it anyway. Okay, I'm gonna start with creating kind of these little, oh, that is a little thicker than I was hoping it would be, zigzags here so that we keep the integrity of that yellow tone. Oh, keep a rag handy because it gets clogged even while it's flowing. Whew, not my favorite tool, guys, not gonna lie. Oh my goodness. All right, let's do the little dots that come out. It's clogged again, so pushing it out onto the tissue. Oh! And just making little dots. I'm not even pushing at the moment, I'm just tapping. So the great thing is when those two dry, we can just take those off and no harm, no foul. Trying to not keep the big ones all like clustered in the same place. I'm trying to have them kind of spread out. Just so it doesn't look weird. And so it looks kind of intentional. Oh man, what a stink. It's clogged again. I keep getting a hunk out, maybe it is clogging so fast. It's kind of blowing my mind how quickly it's clogging. Well, I don't know if you can see, but it exploded all over me. So, I don't know what happened. We'll figure it out, hopefully. All right, so what I'm gonna do instead is I'm taking the tip and I'm dipping it into the bottle and using this to kind of make our dots. And I'm not even going to keep expanding on this side. I'm just going to try and save as much as I can of this side so that they're kind of even. All right, I'm going to go wash my hands. All right, you can kind of see where we are headed with this project. Now, I tried to record this earlier, but my kids were around and it was getting kind of noisy. So I'm just going to talk over what I did since we cut out a little bit and I started to work on this side just to kind of figure some stuff out. So the first thing I did was I added another wash of the yellow. I wanted that to be a little bit brighter, especially up here on the top wing. I really felt like it needed to have a little bit more of a pop. So we added that in really quickly. It won't show up underneath the masking fluid that we have here because we've already placed that down. So I might need to brighten that up in post, but for now, it's going to be fine. I also went through and I added the blue underneath because almost every time you see the blue, it's surrounded by black or a deeper color. And so I think it's okay to start with the blue and allow the other colors to layer over on top of it. That way you I had a little bit of muddiness up here in this on this right-hand side. And so that way we can avoid that by placing the blue first because it's a little bit lighter. And so it's not as likely to make those colors as muddy as it was making the blue for my first round. So for this half, we're starting with the blue first, and then we're going to start adding the other colors. So we've added the blue, we have our yellow a little bit deeper. We're ready to start jumping into some of these other colors. So I'm going to start here. And I'm allowing the color to kind of fade a little bit over here. Wiping my brush off, so I've got a damp brush, and I'm just going to scoop up some of this pigment that will eventually blend in with the brown like we see over here, but I don't want that to happen. I don't want to have to be covering up pigment when I go in with the brown. I want that to be kind of ready, primed and ready to go. Let's see, we've got this black section here. And kind of come up, you can see I already wet this area just a little bit so that it's bleeding nicely. It should kind of create a nice blend for us. Being careful around our blue section. And the nice thing about this, if you find that you're having trouble following the lines for like these blue eyes or these different sections, is that nature is imperfect. And so just like not everybody's freckles are in the same exact place, not every butterfly's spots are going to be exactly the same, even within the same species. So don't stress too much about getting things exactly the way you think that they're supposed to be or exactly the way they appear. Obviously, being as close as possible will get you the best result, but with things that are natural, don't stress about it too much. All right, and then we have some red, some of the same red up here. Looking at my reference image, it goes right down and kind of touches this blue section. I'm going to clean off my brush so it's damp and clean. I'm just going to kind of run that along the edge to get just a little bit of feather, and I'm pulling it out here just a little bit. So it's kind of blending, cleaning it off, wiping it down. It's going to blend in nicely. And this just gives it a slightly softer appearance. There are some more crisp lines in here, but this section isn't one of them. So we just want to keep that where it's supposed to be. All right, I'm going to move on to the black now. So we're using my Hematite Genuine. Any black that you like will do. I have some lamp black and what's the other one called? Whatever the other word is. So that's a little wet. I want it to be a little thicker. So a little more pigment and a little less water so that I don't have to do quite as many layers because this is a pretty rich, deep value. Okay, so we have this masking fluid on it, but I feel like it's a little thicker than it needs to be, so I might not follow it exactly. We'll see, definitely towards the tip here, but we'll see how it goes. I might have to go in after we take the masking fluid off and kind of remove some of those, some of the leftover sections. Now I'm looking at my reference image and this section kind of comes down in like a stripe, an extra stripe, so I want to kind of include that. And then I'm just dabbing in some more of this black pigment to make sure that it's nice and saturated, that we're not going to lose any of that as it dries. All right, picking up some more pigment. Go into this, it's kind of like a, see, it's a polygon. We're pointing in this direction. Made that a little bit big, but that's okay. Again, one of those things that it's not going to be as noticeable to somebody who is just looking at it, but because I know the reference image a little bit more, I'm looking at it, and this particular butterfly, some of his quirks and stuff, it's going to be more obvious to me. All right, we're making some good headway. It's starting to come together, kind of come to life here. So I'm going to start pulling in. We've got the black section that goes here. And then this section here. And then I'm going to rinse off my brush, dab it so that it's still damp, and it's not, I would say it's a dirty brush still. I'm just going to pull this along the edge, just like we've been doing, just to soften everything. Repeat, dipping it into the water, wiping it off on a paper towel or my rag. And I'm just pulling some of the excess to soften the edge. Definitely going to do the same thing here. This is definitely a softer area. I'm going to need to do another layer of that red, so maybe should have waited to add the black in. So if you are watching through before you paint, maybe take note of that. Finish the red part, get it as deep and saturated as you want, and then follow through with the black. We got a little anxious over here. Okay, so washing everything off, cleaning it off, we're dipping into our Scarlet Lake again, mixed with the transparent yellow, and just adding another quick wash. Now, how you do this without reactivating the paint is that there's not a ton of pigment, and there's not a ton of water on your brush. So you're not kind of picking things up, and you're not constantly going over the same area. So if you're not rubbing like this along the paper like I just did to kind of reactivate that. You're just placing it down, moving it into place, adjusting, and then you're leaving. And just adding another layer of paint down to keep things just a little bit deeper. I was hoping that adding that other layer the other layer of the yellow wash on here would kind of be enough to have this be quite as bright as I want it to be, but it's not, so I'm just going to add that in here, being careful not to activate the black, cause problems there. And then a little bit brighter here. There's a little stripe of red here I'm going to add in. Next to a touch of the black. Look for these little quirks with your butterfly. Look for details that might easily be missed. And see if you should add them in. Not everything is necessarily a definitely added in. Some things are, some things just aren't, and that's okay. All right, before I get too carried away, we're gonna mix our brown real quick, and then we'll start adding that in. I think that's what will really bring everything all together. So I'm going to start with, I'm just actually gonna use this yellow with our Scarlet Lake. That's right here. So I know I would like the brown to be nice and warm. Now we're already using cerulean, so I am going to pull that one in, though I don't think it'll be deep enough to get the color where I want it to be, but we'll see. I mean, we're getting pretty close, but I do want to be able to have some richness in there, and all of these colors are fairly light on the value scale. Obviously yellow is. So while that is very close, I am going to add a little bit of black in here that we're already using just to keep everything consistent. Now the black is a very granular color, so it will kind of separate out, and that I think is what we're going to go with. All right, I don't know if you can see what I was talking about with the separation, but I'm going to have to be very careful as I'm placing this down. I don't want my paint to be too watery, or else it'll start to separate. You can see that a little bit on this side, but I don't hate the overall effect, and I'll show you how you can fix that problem if you have that problem with your painting. So we're going to just start applying it to the edges, our brown that we've mixed. Really using every pigment that we've had thus far in our palette. I'm going to keep tapping that in and just bring it down. I want it to be concentrated on the perimeter because that's what it is in my reference image. So I'm placing it down with the tip of my brush, tapping it in as needed. Whoops, sorry, see it was focused on my hand. There we go. And then I'm pushing my brush down and kind of dragging it. This way I will leave less pigment behind. I might pick some of it up, but I can always kind of tap some of it back in. I'm gonna rinse my brush off, tap it off, so I have a dirty brush, and I'm just pulling that down. Kind of slowly blending things together. Now, if I was really on my game, which I'm not right now, I'd have this side blended out as well. So kind of like how we had the red fade here, try and do something similar here. But I really felt like this was more important than this section, to have that be blended out nicely. So by working in small, thin layers, instead of having this whole section be too wet all at once, I'm avoiding some of that separation of the paint. And hopefully it will reward us with a very beautiful gradient. It is the next day because babies wake up when they want. So I am just getting ready to add in a little bit more blue. So I've kind of taken a step back and I'm looking at some of these details, and I want to add a little bit more blue in here just to kind of give that a little bit of an oomph. And since everything is nice and dry, we won't have any problems with kind of immediate bleeding. So I'm going to be very careful not to reactivate some of this red. I'm really just adding the glaze, so it's not very wet and there's not too much pigment on here. So we're just going to kind of softly add this in on some of these edges. And we're just going to deepen this just a little bit. Same thing down here. And we might add a little bit more later on, but I'm pretty happy with how this is going. Okay, now it's time to move down south a little bit. I think we will eventually add a little bit more of the brown here, but I think I want to get this section taken care of while the baby is occupied, basically. So I'm going to dip into our Scarlet Lake with our transparent yellow. So remember, we've warmed it up just a touch. The underpainting will help to warm it up some as well, but I just want to make sure it is exactly as dark as I want it to be. So I'm going to add a little more water so that we have some good flow. And I'm going to bring it up here, and I'm going to work quickly. We're going to jump right into our brown here. Rinsing off my brush, pulling this brown. So we're mixing this brown back together, and we're gonna start adding it in so that it has a nice bleed. I don't want it to be too watery, but I want to see how when those two colors touch, we have a good bleed. That's what we're going for. Okay. I'm going to pull in a little bit more of this brown. And I'm just making sure we get this first layer in quickly. It'll probably need another layer to get it as opaque as I want it to be eventually, but I probably shouldn't have come up here, but that's okay. All right, going in with some more just to deepen this. And then kind of allowing my brush to stay dirty as the pigment starts to fade. I'm going to add a little more water, dab it off, and then just again, kind of with a dirty brush, we're going to just kind of bring this around so that we have a nice gradient. Pick some of this up. The section's black, so I don't need to be too careful about the edge, which is nice. It's nice to have some areas like that once in a while. And then we're gonna kind of fade this. So again, kind of with the, just kind of scrubbing this in. And for areas like this that are very light and you're just kind of putting a quick layer on, the key is to have a very dry brush, pretty dry. So I am constantly going, anytime I'm moving my paintbrush, whatever this thing is called, off of the screen this way, I'm either getting water over here, but I'm most likely dabbing it off on the paper towel or on the rag that's over here, just to get off any of this excess. All right, let me look at my reference again, really study it for a moment. See, I want to bring more of this brown in here. Get nice and dark up here. And then we'll start adding the brown in on this section. But because this has this bleed in here, I want to make sure that we get it started the way that we want. Okay, cleaning my brush off, wiping it off so it's just a damp brush, and just kind of running that over the edge. I'm going to go in with our Scarlet Lilac and transparent yellow mixture, so it's kind of a orange. If you have cadmium orange or yellow or red orange, that would be a good alternative. Dirty damp brush, just going in to make sure our gradient is nice and smooth. I didn't like how that dried, so. And then a little bit more of the brown, tapped right up here so we don't have any overwhelm with that red paint. And that should fade nicely. All right. Let's add this brown here. So I'm actually going to just jump in here because it's nice and dark here and then it starts to fade. So we shall get this nice and pigmented. Now I'm going to add some water, dab it off on my paper or on my rag or paper towel. I keep saying paper towel because I used to use paper towel, but now I just use old rags. I've been an adult long enough to have yucky towels, so that's what I use instead. I'm having a little bit of trouble depositing enough of the pigment, but I don't want to add too much water or I'll get kind of a bloom. So I am going to just tap that in here. And because it's wet, it should spread and fade. And keep dabbing it in. Look and see how it flows. So now I'm getting into kind of some drier areas. You can see how it's left more pigment behind. So I'm going to wash my brush off, wipe it off on the paper towel so it's just damp, and then pull that down a little bit more. All right, that's fading nicely. And I'm going to pull, see how my brush is pushed down against the paper? I'm using that action to pull, and that will help to blend the pigment more. All right, now let's move on to the black. So I'm grabbing some of our Hematite Genuine. And I'm going to start with the eyebrow shape. which is a little irregular, which is good. When something's meant to be a little quirky, you don't have to be as specific. All right, and then we're going to pull this down here. My brush is, see how I'm like, it split a little bit, so I'm getting kind of some little bumps. So I'm just going to go to my palette, I'll show you down here. I'm going to place my brush down and I'm going to twist it, and that'll give me a nice point. So I won't have that anymore. And you can see it's drying a little lighter than we want, so I'm going to go on, just pulling a little more pigment, making sure it's being placed down. And then we'll go back and soften some of these edges in just a moment. All right, clean brush that has been wiped off, so it's just a little damp. Not a new brush, and I'm just pulling that along the edge, wiping it off. And then going back with our black to just deepen up any areas that we've lost. A little too much. All right. Cleaning my brush off. This is probably, whoop, too wet. Oh, you guys, I'm so rusty. It's okay. Proof that anybody can do this. I am so rusty right now from not painting after baby boy number 4 was born, so, which is fine. That's just part of getting back into it. But it doesn't, it's not as natural. Sometimes it just happens by itself, but I really have to be very focused right now. All right, I'm going to let this dry. I will have to go back in and add a little bit more black to that, which is fine. I am gonna start in on the body now. So I'm gonna pull some brown onto my brush. There's not a ton left, so I'm probably gonna have to mix more. While we're here, let's just get these antennae. All right, so I've got some more brown mix. It might need a little more yellow, but we're going to stick with what we've got now. And I'm going to start with another yellow glaze. So we're gonna go in with our transparent yellow just on this upper section here. It just looks like it could use a little bit of warmth here. And then again, kind of at the base. So that's plenty of pigment. I'm going to now go in with a, apparently very wet brush, a cleaned brush, and I'm gonna just spread that out so it's not too harsh. Keeping it on the body, I'm not gonna add it to the head because the head doesn't look like it really has any of that. All right, pretty happy with that. Going to go in with our brown and double checking our reference, start tapping that in. So this is very, very fuzzy little body. So I'm trying to kind of be true to that and do a little bit more wet to wet. Just kind of a damp, dirty brush here, overlaying on the yellow. And this will take a couple of layers to get where we want it to be. And then head into the tip. It kind of fades at the tip, but because I have that yellow there, I am going to do a little bit. I'll just pick this up. Do just a little bit of brown, so it's not too saturated. And then, so this is a slightly damp brush, but I've cleaned it off and I've dried it off on my rag here, and I'm just going to pick up, and that should give us a nice fade without being too obnoxious. All right, They're going to pick up a little bit here too. So we'll layer over that, but that way we have kind of this evidence of what's going on here. Washing my brush off, and then I'm going to kind of pick up some of the pigment here in the middle. That's just a simple trick to help show that this is this is rounded and it's a body by having the shadows fall on either side. Doing the same thing a little bit here. And I'm just fussing it with it. This is definitely where you can kind of fall into the danger of overpainting. So I am just going to do a couple more strokes, a couple things that I want to touch on. Grab this section again. And now I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to look at my reference image. I'm going to look back at the painting that we have, and I'm pretty happy with where it is right now. I'm focusing mostly on the left-hand side. I am going to deepen the blue in here just like we did up top. So I'm going to clean off my brush, go into our blue mixture, and just deepen it. It's a little deeper in person than it's looking through the lens. So just in case, I'm not sure, we'll see how this edits, but I'm not putting a ton down. You might not notice a big difference, but it's definitely blue from my angle. It's definitely blue. I just want a little bit more of that punch. I'm gonna clean my brushes off, and I'm going to grab my eraser so we can remove this masking fluid. So I'm using a Mono Zero eraser. I'll have it linked down below. It's just a pencil eraser. You could also use a large white eraser. I've just found that things seem to go better. Be very careful. For me, this paint is still wet. So you can do it like this with your hands. I have found that sometimes paint will smear, so just be very careful. Sometimes it's just faster with your fingers. Hey, that doesn't look half bad. I was not sure how this section would turn out because it was so much bigger than I thought, but I'm pretty happy with it. All right, let's get this side very carefully. I don't know if you can see it, but there is a little smudge there from me moving my finger. The oils on your finger can reactivate the paint, which is not ideal. So I am trying an eraser on here. I'll probably grab an X-Acto knife. I think it'll be okay overall. All right. All right, to warm up this section a little bit more, just because remember we added another layer of the yellow wash, I'm going to just add our same yellow very lightly. Not very much, we just want a very delicate glaze, and I'm just going to push this over here just to kind of take the stark white edge off of the pigment. Okay, now that this black section has dried, I'm going to go in a little far and fix the area around it, and then add a little bit more black to this section, just so it's as deep as I want it to be on this side. Now, if I wanted to, and I think I will a little bit, I'm going to add in just a couple more stripy details in here, just so it's as fine and delicate as my reference image shows it should be. I don't I mean, I think you get the idea here without it being exact, and it doesn't bother me that it's not exact. I actually am very, very happy with how that turned out, and I thought I would hate it. So that is definitely a win. All right, and there is our finished butterfly. Sorry, I see the light is moving in. Let's scooch you over a bit. So here is our beautiful peacock butterfly. I'm super excited with how it turned out. And I did include both sides just so that you can see and hopefully be encouraged. If you are just starting off with painting and you're just frustrated and struggling with it, I have been painting for over a decade now. No, about a decade now. And just taking a 6-month break after having a baby, I was painting the day before he was born. This is my first side attempt, and you can just see that it's not quite as sophisticated or as high in the craftsmanship as the left-hand side. So we've got kind of my first time and my second time. So if you are really struggling with this and you feel like your first half looks uncomfortable, you're not super happy with it or how it turned out, try it again. See how you can improve on it. I'm sure that it will be much more comfortable and it would just come much more naturally your second time around. And I am speaking obviously from experience. So I am very excited with how this turned out. I hope that you enjoyed making this with me. And until next time, happy painting.